Good morning, friends. Today is April 9th, 22nd, and I have a new video to add to my ad hoc ranting. It's called Comparative Politics or Comparative Trends, not politics, comparative trends. I'm going to begin with this video by composing an overture. You can call it introduction if you want to. Right? Repeat after me. Sunnis of Syria and Iraq were mass murdered and their cities turned into rubble because of them being ISIS. Repeat again. Those majority population of Syria and Iraq, the Sunnis, who are not really religious, right, were murdered, mass murdered, and the majority of the population made refugees. Some made refugees, some basically were murdered in mass, millions, right? Because they are ISIS. The folks of Afghanistan, the majority, were murdered because they're Al-Qaeda. And the people of Ukraine are being murdered because they are Nazis. So repeat after me. Ukraine and Europe. Ukraine Nazis, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, they're ISIS. Nazis, ISIS. Nazis, ISIS. Nazis, ISIS. Oh, wait a minute. So in Chechnya, there was no ISIS, right? All these folks wanted to do is have their independence. And historically speaking, they weren't even part of Russia. They were taken over by some whatever. They weren't taken over because they were to be corrected or be inclusive, by an inclusive government. And no, it's a matter of territory and matter of religion, destroying certain religion and certain people, right? In Afghanistan, in the 80s or late 70s, or 70s for that matter, the Soviet Union and their alliance, the Shiites of Afghanistan, which is dubbed as Northern Alliance now, they were murdered in mass, maybe up to between 1 to 2 million people who probably got only name from religion. They were murdered and they weren't even ISIS or Taliban or Qaeda or anybody else, right? They were just people living in their villages and so on and so forth. Oh, but wait a minute, they wear burqa, right? Burqa, like cover. I come to discover two things. One is not everybody there wear burqa, so it's a matter of choice, right? Family choice. Two, when those people who brought the West on, or communism or whoever it is, accusing Afghans of wearing burqa, and they ruled for 20 years, those Northern Alliance, killing so many people that you didn't hear about, right? They did not forbid burqa. People still, some women still wore burqa and some didn't and so on. Wait a minute, when the Northern Alliance left, some women still wore burqa and some didn't, So you've been had, folks. You've been taken on a murderous ride based on some false assumptions or propaganda or deception and so on and so forth. Who would go kill innocent people and so on because what they wear, right? If they go out in public and wear certain things, you go kill them for that? Just think about it. Well, finally, the chickens come home to roost. In Europe, if you see what's going on now, and if you look in the last century, Nazism is now the ploy to really put Europe into a new phase that is final solution. I call it, there's a grand scheme, final solution. Nazism is no different than Qaeda, than ISIS, than communism, than you name it. Those, like whoever called themselves Muslim movements and so on, than the Iran Revolution, created, thought of, and operated by the same entity. They are no different, folks. Now you may say, well, the last century Nazism was real. Well, because people didn't know what it is. And I have specific information, I recall, that many people in Germany were drafted into Nazism, like it or not. And some of them really didn't know, because they were subjected to harag after World War One. Between World War One and World War Two, people were subjected to really bad treatment and their economy, and now they're paying reparations and so on and so forth for some war in World War One that didn't have anything to do with, right? It was like imposed upon them. So now Nazism equals communism? No. Nazism plus communism plus ISIS plus Shiism plus Alawism plus regime in Syria plus regime in Iran plus regime in Russia plus Castro plus Northern Alliance plus equals what? Netanyahu. Why do I use that name? Because he epitomizes, he is now the leader of that that Talmudic movement, if you will, which is really very old, right? That's very old. Therefore, you cannot now but think in Syria, and I know this for a fact, when they started dumping bunker busters and gases on people and so on and so forth, there was no ISIS, basic and simple. ISIS was, by all means, symbolic, right? The media in the West, basically, somebody, like some really, really evil entities back there, produced terrorist acts, right? Acts of terror. And and the media in the West begins to bark, right? Grow and bark, and that charges people's emotion here in the West, and they send them on wars that are really unjustified, and they start killing innocent people who have absolutely nothing to do with terrorism and whatever it is. But you say, terrorism grew among those people. But those people don't know, folks. And those people who are terrorists and those organizations, terrorist organizations, believe me, they're among you too. They're called communists. They're called Nazis. They're called, and they're all interconnected. The example is really in the last century of Germany, when Germans suffered hell, right? Based on Nazism, which is not theirs, really. It was something, a foreign body on them that came, and they didn't know what to do. When Nazism in Germany was growing and rising, rearing its ugly head, and burgeoning, and striking roots, and so on and so forth, people didn't know what it was, really. For all practical reasons and purposes, that was the movement that was going to alleviate their suffering and pain that was imposed upon them by the Allies at World War One and after. So there you have it, folks. Now, when 10 years later, when it was all over, 10 years, right? Germany is no longer the same. Germany has been destroyed. German's history has been struck by a dagger from behind. German suffered hell, and so on and so forth. You can excuse me. You can blame the Soviets all you want to. Some of them are bad, but they themselves suffered hell between the manifestation and the burgeoning of communism until Nazism, and they became like disturbed mentally and troubled and conflicted. They don't know what's going on. It was their choice, basically. A Soviet soldier's choice was one of two: either live or die. That's what communism gave their soldiers, this choice, basic and simple, like it or not. You either fight and get killed and kill and so on, and there's a chance of surviving, or you die, basic and simple. For a Russian citizen, or wherever communism is, that's the situation. You live or die, and they throw a bone toward you. Communism, folks, still exists. It really never died. And when it was wounded and destroyed in Afghanistan, that cabal of Moses the Crow, or Israel for that matter, brought the international community to heal it and nurse its wounds and so on, raised it back again. And now, don't get this wrong. What's going on is United States and Germany, perhaps, and I'm sure of it, and China, and here and there, and those Arab rulers in the Gulf and elsewhere, they're supporting post-Stalinine like tooth and nail, and money and financially, and you name it. Those, they call themselves Arab League, right? Those pawns of Israel, right? They're supporting post-Stalinine tooth and nail, basic and simple. There's nothing else really you can say about that. Now here's the deal. When Germans saw Nazism, it didn't take too long for Nazism to show its real, pull its lips and show its real teeth, and started drooling and began to kill and maim and so on, and started World War II, and it was terrible, folks. Germans began to realize the predicament they're in and what have befallen them. The circumstances now are parallel to what has happened back then. Now they're accusing Ukraine of being Nazis, and they're talking about denazification. What do you think they're thinking of Germany? Germany, supposedly, that's where Nazism grew up. Think about it, folks. Apocalypse is coming upon you if and when and if post-Stalinine makes it to your border and to your country. That's apocalypse, folks. Germany will be erased. I even doubt that they will allow the country to be called Germany again in that land. What was in the plan? I said this many times before, I'm going to repeat it. What's in the plan is really horrific, and you learned your lesson. Some of you still live. Some of you, your ancestors from that area, from that time, transmitted this knowledge to you, transferred this knowledge to you, and so on, what happened and so on. And you still have that, before you, that span of time, of the last century, those events and so on. What's going to happen, folks, is really terrible. You're going to be taken down, and this thing called white race, Scandinavians, Germanics, and you will be dissected. You will be made, you will be dispersed all over the place, and many of you probably would be killed. They're in those who are coming from Russia now. They're probably trained that you are Nazis, and it's going to be no different than when the Soviets arrived in Berlin, right? In Berlin, what did they do, right? Rape of Berlin, remember? They still, those people coming, those soldiers and conscripts coming now from Russia, have the same mentality, and they will do the same thing. Because to them, revenge was not completed at World War II. For them, revenge will keep taking place time and again until that German nation is completely erased. I'm not exaggerating. There is a parallelism in the trends, whether it is Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or Middle East in general, right? And here and there, and what's happening in China internment camps, concentration camps for the Muslims. And now you saw that in Europe. You thought you were cleansed in World War One and World War Two last century, and that's not going to happen to you anymore. People, you can't be more wrong. Speaking of the Holodomor, Ukraine was subjected time and again to horror, right? In the last century, when the Holodomor happened, or whatever Stalin and his brother, real brother Lenin did, right? Lenin did. There was no Nazism, right? You don't know the parallelism. We in Syria, I am from Syria, and I grew up in the western side of Homs, right? Western side of Syria, in like the city of Homs, that was completely destroyed. Well, almost completely, except for the area where the regime people are, who are loyal to the regime. And these people, I'll describe them to you, those creatures. I'll describe them to you in a little bit. There was something similar, something we called Safar Barlik, or the Travels of Barlik. Barlik, I don't know where that name comes from. Probably Turkish. We were under, Syria was under the Ottomans. Rules, not that the Ottoman rules was bad, but its last part, the last few, or the last, I don't know, I would say 50 to 100 years, I don't know. That was the bad part. But when it was earlier, oh, wow, we had full freedom, and so World War One happened. And suddenly Syria is subject to a horror of re-engineering and so on. Many people were conscripted and sent to World War One, and they never came back, really. You hear, when I was young, you hear, and you sit here and there, and you hear from people that their grandfather or their relative and so on, last century, early in the century, went to Safar Barlik, or the war in Europe, World War One, and they never came back. And now all the harvest, wheat and whatnot, was basically taken out by the Ottomans and supposedly sent to the front, but I doubt it. It was more like the Holodomor, re-engineering of people. And I have testimony from people that are who were there. One of them is my father, and I talked to him about it. He says, son, whole houses, like many houses, became empty. Empty means people died from hunger, and the house is no longer inhabited. They was just there. And Armenians, he mentioned to me that the Armenians suffered. He said they've taken it really bad because they became refugees, like from Armenia, and they came to Syria, right? And it was during that time, something similar to the Holodomor, when all the agricultural industry was taken out and people were left to die. He said in Syria, probably alone, he said something like about 1 million people of them died because they were refugees. They're out, similar to the Syrian people now leaving, Syria and so on, becoming refugees. But he said at the same time, there's no food. He said otherwise people would, help and so on and so forth, right? It does seem like they were against the Turkish or the Ottomans in the war, something. I don't know the reason of it, but but he said that's the majority of those who died, really, and they accused Turkey of slaughtering them. He says no, the majority of those died really in during that period, which is similar to the Holodomor in Ukraine. And now I have discovered that when the Holodomor happened in Syria, or Safar Barlik, the Safar Barlik, I don't know what Barlik is. You'll have to dig it up. Barlik, B-R-L-E-K, Barlik or Barlik, I don't know. But anyways, it seems like certain segment of the population, and that's a minority, survived just fine. They had food and all. But then those Sunnis were gutted very bad because they couldn't find food anymore. I remember my own grandmother, who was born in the late 1800s, and she lived like 95 years old, or 89 or something like that. They lived long, those guys, and whose sister lived like 115 or something. I remember her testifying personally. I heard that while I was sitting and she was talking about it. Uh, she said you would go to the market to buy some stuff or whatever it is because there was like no money anymore, and except those few. She was one of them, right? Uh, and you would see people sitting on the sidewalks, right? And some of them moaning and crying, hungry, 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 hungry. She said you would come back by the time you finished shopping in the market, whatever is left in the market, right? And you would walk back and come back, and then some of them you could clearly see some of them have already died from hunger. And then horse-drawn carriages, carts, right, would come every day and collect the dead and take them outside of the city and bury them in mass graves, right? So early in the last century in Syria, at least Lebanon included, I believe, in Palestine, and I don't know about elsewhere, but at least those places, uh, millions died, folks. Big parts of the city were basically empty. Uh, I find this extremely related and connected to what happened in Ukraine and what happened in Europe and what's happening in Europe and in the Middle East now. They are very connected, folks. I kid you not. Communism brought horror. So there's parallelism and in the trends, right? Uh, so now repeat after me. Europe is Nazi. Middle East is ISIS. Get it? Get it? Okay, good. We humans keep repeating the same mistake. When clouds are looming on the horizon and things are appearing, if you ever read that Sun Tzu, Art of War and so on, it tells you, and these guys behave and act based upon it. They show up as if they are a benign war or very lightweight or limited scope and so on and so forth, when apocalypse is walking just behind them. They're walking and apocalypse is walking behind them. As soon as these things get settled, things happen. I kid you not, folks. What's happening in Ukraine and the signs uh, uh, of what is happening, and the accusation and the usage of the slogan Nazism and so on should sound very ominous and foreboding to the Germans people. I wouldn't take this lightly. No, no, no. Germans, you can either fight the war on your land, and NATO will make sure, and your government too, will make sure that you don't fight, right? And that's what they're making. You're sure of that now, right? You're pretty sure of that now, that NATO and EU, they're not doing anything. And by that, they're really helping Pustalini, basic and simple. And that's that, folks. All I can say is for Europeans in the West, hell is coming. But it seems like the mules have stumbled. That's very funny. In Ukraine, and the Ukrainians basically made, they pulled America. Scandinavia, you better unite now and like unite your common, defense and industries and so on and ramp up. Like I mentioned earlier, there is no longer a choice for you to declare neutrality or not play the game or no, not anymore. Those dark side of communism, the dark side of communism, is coming there for some bloodletting, believe me. They want to make sure that people don't have a chance anymore not to vote, not to do anything really, if you guys are left there. In my opinion, they will take you because they will take you and disperse you around, and I think they are going to erase Germany completely this time around. And you may cry, oh, that's not fair, and so on, and they will accuse you again, oh, you Nazi, you shut up, and so on. And if they did what they did in World War II to you now, like ravage Germany and so on and so forth, and then something happened, and they stopped. Like the West, for example, it was somewhat free and then blocked communism from moving westward. And and then you got reprieved by the destruction of the Soviet Union by those Muslims, Sunni Muslims in Afghanistan. Uh, and then now they're doing what they're doing to you. If they ravaged you and say something stopped them, and they come back like 20 years later, or 40 years later, or 60 years later, and they start ravaging Germany again, and you would say this is not fair, they will accuse you of being Nazi. You being stigmatized by Nazis forever, just like us, the Muslims, Sunni Muslims, they stigmatized those Muslims as ISIS forever. Period. Uh, you don't understand those creatures from the East, folks. You don't. Many of them are remnant of the Mongol hordes, the Hulagu and the Genghis Khan and their mechanical savagery and so on, and the destruction of civilization. The purpose is very simple, folks. You may think this is far-fetched. I said this before. You may think this is far-fetched, or this is something that is imagination. Like a wave of imaginations just hit me. No, 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 no. The purpose is nothing less than animalizing you humans. In the last century and this century, they were after the state, and that has been achieved. Destruction of the state and owning the power structure in the state. Now the purpose is the family, basic and simple. You being family, that's for them, that's not acceptable for those post-Stalinins. They invented Nazism for you, and they did what they did to you, and they will do whatever they can to completely strip you of your family, of your ethics, of everything. They may even not leave you your language. Let's say, let's put it this way. And that's how it's going to be, folks. If you look in the last century and this century, a lot of things happened. The spread of drugs, the destruction of power structure, the state, the church is no longer the same, or us, like the mosques and so on. Nothing is the same anymore, folks. I mean, if you look at it in comparing the trends of the last century, early last century, before communism arrived on the scene, and then whatever, or Zionism for that matter, what's his name? Theodore Herzl. Until now, it's really no longer the same. The world now is a painful place to live at, here in the US, in Europe, in China, and here and there, and so on. In China, the average Chinese citizen is a workaholic. It's mind-boggling how they live. And Africa's poverty and so on and so forth. You may say Africa has always been poor. That's not the case, folks. They were living fine early last century. Maybe they didn't have skyscrapers or whatever, but their life was fine as family, as town, as tribe, as whatever it is. And they didn't want to walk across the desert and go to Europe to get some money, just to eat or something of the sort. Because now life under this new modern Zion or communism or Nazism or whatever it is hopeless. It's basic and simple. For the individual, it's hopeless. So the purpose now is really, I see it hypothetically speaking and virtually speaking, is the destruction of the family, basic and simple. The family has suffered a lot in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 decades. I mean, maybe more than that. There's like total destruction of the family, but it still holds, There's still transmission of knowledge and ethics and so on, and here and there. There's for those people, the post-Stalinins and the Castros, no, that's not acceptable, folks. And they're on the advance, right? This has been halted now, but not if you wait and see. Something else I want to tell you, and that's a very important point. In the last 2 years, during that fake pandemic, a lot of money was stolen. And I quote one certain anchor on certain financial TV here in the US making the statement that this has been the biggest transfer of wealth in history. Really true, like those people on account of governments and that they own now. Oh, they stole the world, folks. Trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions. And after 2 years, getting people busy with this fake pandemic, right? They piled up a lot of stolen trillions, and they're replete with illegitimate wealth, right? That is forbidden, right? And now in Europe, and what was going to happen in the United States after January 6th, and in Europe, this stolen money, which is heavy, is going to buy a lot of wealth of society or real estate or whatever it is. Basically, their set of folks now have illegitimate money, whether it's Russia or Iran or anywhere else, right? And they're going to dislodge the original owners. So if you're in Germany and you own this hotel and you own this land and you own this farm and they're going to own it, folks. They're going to force you by force. They're going to force you to buy it, and that's it, folks. Guess what? And then the money eventually will be deleted by way of that Israeli Bitcoin. Why? They convert your money into a Bitcoin or whatever coin, right? And then next day you wake up in the morning after your money has been converted to Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency, and then it's worth nothing, right? So you see the game, folks. First, they owned the companies by way of stock market, meaning that they would get money from the government, through the government, stolen, of course, right? Trump, Obama, you name it, gave them trillions, right? And then they would offer those private owners of companies, they would offer them, to go on the stock market and so on, and they own the company now. That they had money to invest. No. Trump, Obama, Biden, you name it, would put debt on the United States and give it to them, and they in turn own the companies now. And then the original owners are kicked out, and their money. What do they do with their money now? The money that they took by selling their companies and their lands and whatever it is. Just think about it, folks. And if they don't sell, they begin to be harassed. I know of certain situations where owners of companies were basically either their airplane crashed or something of the sort. And guess what? No. So folks in Europe, in Germany, and in Scandinavia, and in France for that matter, and in Spain, and in Portugal, and in Italy, and Eastern Europe, folks, apocalypse is coming your way. It may, in my opinion, it may happen like after they take over, they begin the total and systematic murder and ravishing of your country, or it may take a little while, but that's it, folks. Especially Germany. They're focused on Germany. Why? Because they're talking about, and Scandinavia for that matter. Why? Because they're talking Nazism again. This Nazism, they invent something like this and they capitalize on it for centuries, folks. Basic and simple. Similar to terrorism. Turns out that terrorism is all the work of Shiites, the ones that were murdering millions in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and now Yemen and here and there. Oh man, it's horror. So you Europeans, it's not like you're out of the woods, because their considerations for you is exactly how they feel about the Sunnis. You better act now to defend yourself. Again, the loss in Ukraine doesn't mean that Pustalinine is going to stop, or they're telling you all kind of things on TV and in the media. They haven't changed, folks. They will not change. They invested so much time and evil thinking in this process and this expedition, and they will not abandon it, folks. You better fight them in Ukraine now by sending conscripts and weapons and so on and so forth. And you better now. You better help now, folks. Don't worry about the leaders of Ukraine. Just go to the army, just send it to the army and here and there, and they will distribute it. They know how to distribute it. That's all, folks. I can't impress on you enough to tell you that apocalypse is in the making, similar to the people of the Muslim world when the Mongol horde came through, right? And they didn't think this was going to be what it became. Within years, basically, it was hell. And there was no armies. Basically, people were living without military, without armies, and because prosperous lives, learning, society, justice, police, universities, science, math, you name it, medicine, all that was going on, and people thought they had become they had almost achieved utopia. It turns out that apocalypse was coming with those people. I'm going to give you a piece of information that is very important. When Hulagu, or his son, I think, invaded Baghdad, there was nothing there. Reports have it, and I know they're reliable, that those hordes were climbing the walls of Baghdad like ants, colonies of ants, right? And the army back then was something like the Caliphate army was like 10,000, nothing really. It was, so they were outnumbered at least 10 to 1, perhaps at that point. And there was initial skirmish, and they won, right? They held off those armies of Hulagu. But then there were Shiites in there. One of them is called Ibn al-Alqami, right? And he worked with the Mongols, right? Even though he was a vizier, secretary of so and so, and they were living best life and so on, and they were Shiites, right? But they held something deep inside that was not good. And they flooded the plain where those 10,000 camped of the Caliphate army. And even though they were outnumbered like 10 to 1, yet the Mongols couldn't beat them on the first round, right? And when they were flooded, that's it, folks. They were disabled. They were flooded by those very, very Shiites now being supported by the West in Iraq, right? Who eventually come to kill millions in Afghanistan and in Iraq and here and there. And in Iran too, you don't know the history of the Safavid and so on. Here's the piece that is very important. The Mongols, now Baghdad was built by Arabs, by the Abbasides. There was nothing there. They just came and built it, and people started flocking to it. Became the city of light, learning center in the world, the main learning center in the world. They murdered almost every Muslim, but they spared the Christians and the Jews. Believe me on this. This is true as it gets. That has changed, folks. That has changed. So now, my advice to you, Germans, whoever you are, time to regroup and go to Ukraine, man. People go to Ukraine and fight them off there. They're far weaker than you think they are, Do you remember that, okay, your NATO and establishment in Europe, they're working with Post-Stalinine, and they were expecting him, right? And he, in agreement with them, planned by Israel, right, conducted that missile test in Belarus, right? That ballistic missile test. Why? Because he wants to give them an excuse in case the European people wonder, why aren't you intervening? We say, they don't want to escalate, because you see, it's how it works. He gave them the reason, and they used it. They were all in preparation for something big. It's time to act now, folks, and that's it. Nothing else I can say to you except what's coming your way. Why are they holding back from genociding in, they killed a few thousand, yes, in Ukraine, but why are they holding back from genocide? Because they don't want to alarm you in Germany and so on. Because if they start killing millions in Ukraine, guess what? No scheme is going to work, and the German people and the Scandinavian people and here and there are going to rise up and say, we can't wait for this to come our way, right? So they're holding back, but if and when they've taken over and they arrived at Western Europe, when they make sure that nobody can fight them back, that's when they begin the genocide. There are plenty of them that are capable of being like a murderous nature and so on and so forth. Some of those people that come through the army, with the army, similar to the SS of Germany back then, I told you about this before, that the SS and their brothers in the Red Army, they would commit atrocities to make people hate each other. But those folks, they're raised to believe that you're an animal, they can kill you with impunity. And some of them just don't care. They just do that and go to sleep next day, at night without any qualms, and they sleep tight and so on. They wake up next day and they start murdering people in mass. Have a nice day, my friends. I can't say enough to impress on you what is going on and how and when and what to do and so on and so forth. You're smart folks, you can do whatever you want to do, but Europe as has existed for thousands of years is now in question, period. You may think this is benign. Again, I'm going to repeat this. You may think this is just a limited scope operation. Oh, no, no, no. This is a very comprehensive final solution for Europe, especially you Germanics. I even doubt they will leave you with your language or even the name of your country, or you as people there. Many of you will be wiped out. Many of you will be dispersed here and there through outside Siberia. And have a nice day, my friends. And I wish you well.